Ning will be presenting information on a topic that most of us are likely to be familiar with. She will be talking about autism spectrum disorders, providing information as to just what exactly this disorder is. An autism diagnosis occurs in 1 out of 68 children, with 5 times as many boys being affected. It appears that the numbers are increasing steadily for this disorder, and Julie will offer some ideas as to why this is occurring. Julie has worked with many children with autism over the course of her career as a speech-language pathologist. The title of her speech is The Rain Man Effect. Please welcome Julie Marslip.
I was a graduate student in the 90s when I learned that I would be needing to work with a population of students that clapped their fingers in front of their faces and hit their heads against the wall and did things like throw feces across the room and rocked back and forth screaming and shrieking. I was a little intimidated by all this because as a beginning speech and language pathologist, I would need to teach these kids how to communicate. Well, things have changed a lot since then, and a lot of people are aware of what this disorder is, autism. It seems as though it has really been on the increase, like the prevalence is increasing incredibly. So today what I'd like to do is examine some reasons why. I'm going to tell you about 2 reasons why autism seems to be increasing, and then I want to share a major misconception that people have about autism. So first of all, is autism really on the increase? I don't think it is. One reason for that is the way that autism is diagnosed. Autism right now there's a diagnosis, autism spectrum disorders, and that has 3 disorders under it. Autistic disorder, Asperger's disorder, and pervasive developmental disorder. So there's 3 of these different disorders under one term. So that's one reason why it seems that autism is on the rise. You may be wondering, well, what exactly is autism? This, from the Statistic Manual of Mental Disorders 5, is what qualifies an individual to be considered as having autism. First of all, there's a marked deficit in social language. So some kids with autism are nonverbal, where other kids do not have a language impairment. They're able to speak quite well, but they always have a problem with social language, and that they have a hard time entering and joining conversations, maintaining conversations, understanding facial expression, body language, reading into what's going on in social situations, understanding vocal tone, things like that. So that's one of the big hallmarks of autism. And secondly, for somebody to be diagnosed with autism, they have to have 2 of these 4 different types of restrictive repetitive behaviors. First of all, repetitive motor behaviors, which is what I was talking about, the flapping and the rocking, that type of motor activity. Secondly, insistent on sameness. Oftentimes, children with autism, they really like to stay within a well-established routine. So if a child comes into a room and always sits in the blue chair, he has to sit in the blue chair, or he won't be able to cope with it if you ask him to sit in the green chair. Next is restricted, fixated interest. Some kids, they just cannot get off their particular topic of interest. If they want to be interested in airplanes, it's all about airplanes, or vacuum cleaners, or chariots, or whatever it might be, but they will perseverate on their own special interests. And finally, sensory issues. The kids becoming overwhelmed by too much light in the room, or too much noise or motion, or they could become overwhelmed by the smell. So there's a lot of things in that way where kids can have sensory issues when they have autism. So again, they have to have 2 or more of these restrictive repetitive behaviors. So what's another reason why it seems that autism is increasing? There's something I like to call the Rain Man effect. Rain Man was a movie that was very popular many years ago, and the main character, whose name is Raymond, had autism, but he also had savant abilities. He had super abilities. He was able to, if somebody dropped toothpicks, he could count all the toothpicks on the way down. He could memorize phone books. He went to Las Vegas with his brother and he counted cards. So what did Rain Man, the movie Rain Man have to do with autism? Well, it put a face on autism, and it made autism seem to be a very special disorder and one that we could appreciate, one where people had real special hidden talents. So let's take a look and see if that's the case where people with autism have superior intelligence to the average population, the typical population. So here, Center for Disease Control, they're comparing kids with autism, or I'm sorry, people with autism with people in the general population, and intellectually disabled individuals with autism is at 38%. We used to use the word mentally retarded, we now use intellectual disabilities, 38%, compared to the general population of 2% in that same category of intelligence. Below average intelligence, IQ of 71 to 84, 24% of the autistic population within that, and 14% of the general population. And then finally, normal intelligence or higher, which is 38% of the autistic population and 84% of the general population. So as you can see, this demonstrates that autism does co-occur with intellectual disabilities. But people realize that children and people with autism do have a disability. So what people really believe in autism is that these special underlying abilities that kids have. So let's take a look at that. According to the Wisconsin Medical Society, 1 in 10 individuals has a special ability that is autism. By special ability, I mean somebody can make and remake simple appliances, or perhaps recite a Disney movie word for word after hearing it, or something like having perfect pitch. Those types of things equate to a special ability. But most people tend to think of the super abilities, like the outliers. There are about 50 outliers in the world, according to this website I was looking at, the Wisconsin Medical Society, who has reviewed this information. People who can do things like read a book. There's a person who can read a book. The left eye reads one page and the right eye reads another page, and the person can understand all that information and retell it. There's a person who can look at a 3D object and then create it in a sculpture just easily like that. And someone else who can listen to a piano concert and then recreate it without having ever practiced. That is the type of outlier activity that I think the general public, because of that movie Rain Man, tend to think that people with autism have, but it's actually very uncommon. So about 50 people in the world population have that type of ability. And of that 50, 25 are people who have other types of disabilities, other types of developmental disabilities, or even acquired brain damage. So that particular type of idea with autism, that there's all these savant abilities that run in autism, is something that actually isn't true. And I think it is a little maybe depressing to think about that. But although we have all these numbers and figures about people who have autism, it doesn't convey who it is that people are. These are just numbers and figures. And after having spent many years working with children with autism, I do understand that they're very special and very interesting on their own. It's one of my favorite groups of kids to work with. And I no longer believe that autistic kids are just those finger-flapping kids who scream. And I'm hoping that today I have brought you up to date as well on the world of autism.